Hello. This presentation is on research presentation elements that you will use in order to complete your project. All right, so you will actually be doing a presentation on your research project. And in order to present your research project, you'll need the title of your research, your name and affiliation, which will be St. George Fire Department, and the date of the presentation. Now, before you can actually start to give us the research that you did, you'll need to give us a little bit of background. In other words, a brief context of the research topic. And then the research question or hypothesis that you were actually looking at, the problem that you wanted to solve, the goals of your study. Now, the research question or hypothesis and the background might all kind of come together for you based on your own experiences. So, for example, you may have noticed a problem in your work that you wanted to address. So, the problem may have come from an experience that you had. It may come from something that you began to notice over time, an issue, we'll say, and you started to notice this problem and started to wonder how it could be addressed more efficiently. So, you can talk a little bit about that in the background. And you may even want to see, is this a problem based on literature? How is it being handled in other places? And then you may have a research question that you form around that. So you'll want to do a literature review. In other words, if you've noticed a problem, then what does the literature say about the problem? You'll want to look at articles. You'll want to look at websites. And these need to be relevant research websites, not just people's opinion, but fire science websites. So what do people say about this problem? And how has it been addressed other places? And do we know if it's been addressed scientifically? In other words, do we know that some research has been done that can conclude that something is better for addressing the problem that you've noticed than something else? Now, it may be that you find that there's a gap in the research. In other words, you've noticed a problem, other people have noticed it, but maybe nobody has really studied it. Maybe you're going to be the person who studies it. And that's something that you can explain as a necessary reason for your research. You'll want to tell us a little bit about your research design. Is it qualitative? In other words, did you go out and interview people? And if so, how did you find the people that you wanted to interview? Who were they? Why did you choose them? Was it quantitative? For example, did you do survey research? And if so, how did you develop your instrument for researching? And how did you deliver it? For example, SurveyMonkey. And how did you think about the questions that you wanted to put on the survey? Did you pilot the questions? Did you show it to other, maybe experienced firefighters? So once you got your data, how did you analyze it? So you want to take a time to think about your research design. What's the best way to get the data that you want? And then how are you going to collect the data? Now, once you've done that, you'll want to think about, all right, so I know what kind of data I want or need. I know how I'm going to collect the data, but I just don't know how many people I might need to ask. This is like a certain thing that you could come to myself or Chief Yates, somebody who's done some research and say, hey, I'm not sure how much of a sample size I need. In general, with qualitative research, if you're going to do a case study, it might be 5 to 8 people. Qualitative research can take a long time to analyze. With quantitative research, you might need more, but it depends on the question you're asking and what type of population you have. For example, if you wanted to do a study of firefighter administrators, especially those in their first 2 years as administrators, you might need to ask 100 administrators. So you would have to go to lots of fire stations around the country, maybe, or at least around Louisiana, Texas, some different places. You don't physically need to go there, but you might have to send your survey to quite a few firefighters. You're going to want to let us know what your key findings are. In other words, how can you present your data? If you have survey data, the easiest way to do it is with charts, graphs, and tables. And the easiest way to do that would be through something like Excel. If you're not sure how to do that, this is something that Alex can help you with. You'll want to analyze your data. There's plenty of tools on Excel for looking at that. What does your data mean? In other words, once you've collected data, thinking about what the data means is very important. With qualitative data, looking for themes across multiple people that you've interviewed. If you ran focus groups, what were some of the trends and what people said? If you looked at statistics, what do the numbers actually mean if we were to look at them? This is something that you might need help with. Now, this is one of the most important parts. If you decided, based on your data, that there was something that St. George could do differently, then you need to create a budget for it. How much would it cost to make the change that you are suggesting? Your project shouldn't be about complaining or coming up with like, oh, I think leadership should just be different and morale would go up. No, you got to come with a clear, defined solution. What is your solution and what would it cost? And you need to create a budget for that. So what steps would need to be taken to implement your project? If you had a budget and you knew the cost of your project, then what would someone need to do in order to implement this project? If you were in a leadership role, if you were a captain, if you were in a battalion chief role, could you implement this project? And if so, what would be the cost of it? What steps would you take? In your discussion, you'll need to interpret your results. You'll need to compare your results with what other people found in the literature. And if nobody had findings like yours, you'll want to say how your results are unique compared to other people's. You'll want to relate your findings to previous studies. And then the limitations. What were some of the limitations of your particular study? Maybe a limitation was that you only looked at St. George Fire Department. Maybe you only looked at new firefighters or novices instead of looking at all firefighters. Just because you have a limitation, I want to make clear that a limitation is not a problem. Limitations are okay. They just tell us what areas of research might be important to look at for a future study. Please do not be afraid to state your limitations. They don't make your study any less important or relevant. All right, so at the very end of your presentation, you'll want to talk about summarizing your key points and the implications that they have for your work in leadership at St. George and any recommendations that you have for future research or practical applications. Invite questions from the audience and answer any questions that you can. And whatever you can't answer, that's okay. Just acknowledge people's questions, tell them you are unsure, be honest, and let them know that they've had a great question for you. All right. If you have not looked at the video on giving a professional presentation, now would be a good time. So think about your research and think about how to do the research in a professional presentation. Thank you for watching.